Welcome to Get Your FRQ On. This is a graphing calculator tutorial because many of the questions on the AP Calculus exam are calculator active. If you don't know how to use your graphing calculator to do the calculus and operate it in all the different ways you're going to need to, you can be giving up points that could be very valuable. So in addition to doing free response question solutions on this channel, we're also going to be covering how to use a graphing calculator. That being said, this first video is about the basic keypad on a graphing calculator. Now in this video, and all my videos, I will be using a TI-84 Plus CE. That's just what we have available to us at the school where I teach. You may very well use different graphing calculators. The main point is most graphing calculators should have all of the same functionality, maybe set up in the menus a little bit differently, but should be able to do pretty much all the same things. The best way to learn how to use the graphing calculator that you will be using is to read the documentation provided with it and to actually use it a lot. All right, so let's get started. The most basic keys on the keypad are going to be your number keys right here. All right, so I've got the numbers 0 through 9, I have a decimal point, and I have the negative sign. One special thing to understand about the negative sign is that it is a negative sign. It is not intended to be used for subtraction. All right, the subtraction key is over here. We have division, multiplication. This is subtraction. It's not supposed to be used as a negative sign, so don't use it that way. The addition sign, and then the enter key on your graphing calculator is basically the equal sign. If you've typed in an expression and you want to evaluate it, just hit enter. It's the same as the equal sign. On the left-hand side, over here, we have a math button. That's going to open up a bunch of math functionality and multiplicative inverse. It's not a function inverse question. A squaring key, a common logarithm key, a natural logarithm key, a store key, which is kind of handy. It allows us to store a specific value into a variable. So if that value is, several decimal places long, we can just store it into some variable like b, and then only type in the b when we need that number. And then down here in the lower left, we have the on button. If your calculator is off, just press the on button, and that should turn it back on. We also have these keys right here, which are for really syntax. Sometimes we create lists and we need to separate the items in a list with a comma, or we need to group things with parentheses. That's very common in mathematical expressions where we would have to group things. We have our trigonometry functions right here, sine, cosine, and tangent. We have our exponentiation key right here. That's what that little caret, it's called a caret. It just looks like a little arrow pointing up, only it doesn't have the stem. Here we have the apps keys. The TI-84 Plus CE comes with certain apps pre-installed. It's really special functionality. It's basically like pre-installed programs. They actually do quite a bit. You can also create your own programs if you know how to use the programming language. The vars key gives us access to variables that are stored on the machine. And then the clear button up here will clear a specific entry. We'll talk about that in a separate video when we compare clear to delete. These four keys right here, mode is going to allow us to change and determine a whole bunch of settings. This key right here, it doesn't really have a name. It's just an X, a T, a funny looking 0, and an N. That's really a key that we would use to grab a variable depending on what mode we're in. X typically for functions, T for what we call parametric functions, theta for polar functions, and N for sequences. Depending on which mode you are in, pressing that button will get you one of those four things. The stats button allows us to do a bunch of statistical calculations if you're taking like AP stats or something like that. The second key and the alpha key both increase the functionality of the keys. The second key, if you look at all these keys down here, you'll notice that they have like something in blue above them. To access that functionality, you would hit the second key. And then alpha is green. Notice that a lot of these also have green characters above them. That's to use alpha characters specifically for typing, accessing variables which are named with a letter. We have our arrows over here, which allow us to navigate in our menus and in our screen. We'll talk about that in another video. And these 5 buttons on the top, on the left we have y equals, that's for defining a specific function. If we define a function and we want to graph it, we're going to want to be able to determine the viewing window for our graph when we want to look at it. Our zoom in, zoom out, maybe we can set that to be a specific zoom level. Tracing allows us to look at the graph and then actually move a cursor along the graph instead of just left and right. And then if you want to just look at the graph and get the graph, you would click on the graph button. All right, so those are the basic keys on your graphing calculator. On this one, again, it's a TI-84 plus CE, but your calculator may be a little bit different. But they all should operate pretty much the same way.